Three enemies that are stopping you from becoming.
Paytm. If you're in India, I'm sure you've heard of it, and most of you may have also used it. But you know what it means? Paytm is an acronym. The full form is Pay Through Mobile, Paytm. It pioneered India's digital payment system. It was synonymous with paying by phone. The tagline is Paytm Karo. Paytm Karo. Almost like a slogan. That's how popular this company became. India's most celebrated unicorn, a mammoth fintech giant. But not anymore. Paytm is off to a rough start in 2024. Its payments bank has been given the death sentence. It came from India's central bank, the Reserve Bank of India. It has barred Paytm from banking activities, no transactions, no wallet top-ups, nothing. And it has left many asking, what happened? What is the Paytm story? How did this company grow so big and why did it fall? Hello and welcome. I'm Palki Sharma and this is Between the Lines. This man is the founder of Paytm. His name is Vijay Sharma. Once India's youngest billionaire, although he had truly humble beginnings. This is a rags to riches story. Sharma's early education was in a government school. He says he could not speak in English till the age of 15. Now, if you're in India, it can be an impediment to growth. So Vijay Sharma says that he taught himself. He went to the Delhi Technological University. After graduation, he could have taken a 10-to-5 job, but he chose not to. He set up something called indiasite.net. It clicked. He sold it for $1 million. Then he rode the .com wave. That too was a success. In the year 2000, he took a loan of 8 lakh rupees, around $9,000, to set up a company called 197 Communications. That's the parent company of Paytm. Now, initially, 197 Communications offered digital goods and services. It was doing well, but not well enough for its founder. He wanted more. In 2010, he launched Paytm with an initial investment of $2 million. Sharma wanted to disrupt the market to get everyone to pay by phone. Paytm started off as a prepaid mobile and DTH recharge platform. In 2013, it expanded, adding debit card and postpaid mobile payments. The big breakthrough came 1 year later. In 2014, Paytm introduced the wallet system. It was an instant hit. Indian Railways and Uber added it as a payment option. You could pay your electricity bill, your metro card fees, and your water bill through this one wallet. It was revolutionary. The user base grew rapidly. In 2014, they had around 11 million users. By 2015, around 100 million. So it was gaining popularity and how, but cash was still king in India. In 2016, that changed. India demonetized 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. People were left with no option, really. They turned to digital payments, and Paytm made the most of it. Demonetization made it a household name and necessity. Digital payments surged. And with this surge, Paytm grew bigger. By 2017, it was a giant, the first payment app with over 100 million downloads. Millions of merchants signed up for it. They became Paytm clients. They were issued QR codes. These codes were linked to their bank accounts. You could scan the QR and pay. No haggling for cash, no waiting for change. It was simple and a game changer. More and more people signed up. Your auto drivers, your repair shops, every business, small and big, was coming on board. By 2021, Paytm had 150 million active users. Every month, the company processed 1.2 billion transactions. It continued expanding, adding other services, like tickets for movies or flights, selling gold insurance, even remittances. Paytm was doing everything. Its investors were happy. We're talking about Alibaba, the Ant Group, and SoftBank. They were the top investors in Paytm. They decided to take the company public. And in November 2021, Paytm launched its IPO in India. IPO is initial public offering when you offer shares in your company to public. And this was the biggest IPO in India's history then. Paytm raised about 18,300 crore rupees. That's around $2.3 billion. At the valuation of 20 billion US dollars. It's like the company had a Midas touch. Everything it touched turned to gold, as if nothing could go wrong, yet everything did when trading began. In 2021, Paytm's IPO share price was 2,150 rupees. That's the price of one share that was offered. On November 18, Paytm was listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange. The share started trading at around 1,950 rupees, so it was already lower by 9%. By noon, it was trading at 1,800 rupees. At the closing bell, it was at 1,560 rupees, so it closed at almost 27% less than the initial offering. It was almost like a crash. 40,000 crore rupees of investor wealth was wiped out in a day. 40,000 crores. It's more than the market cap of several big companies. The IPO was a huge failure. It was also the start of Paytm's unraveling. The company was called a cash guzzler. Experts and investors were concerned. They were worried about lack of direction. They questioned its scale. They questioned the profitability. Doubts started creeping in, which brings us to the latest saga. The crux of the problem was the Paytm Payments Bank, a subsidiary of Paytm. It came into existence in 2017. The same year, it got a banking license. And within months, it faced its first hurdle. The bank got a regulatory strike. It was accused of multiple violations, non-compliance of KYC guidelines. That's a mandatory process of verifying client identity. KYC, know your customer. Plus, day-end balances were breached. So in June 2018, the RBI cracked down. It halted the opening of new accounts. Paytm responded. A compliance report was submitted. And by the end of that year, the ban was lifted. In 2021, things unraveled further. RBI hit Paytm with a fine of 1 crore rupees. They said the bank had submitted false information, and the troubles did not end there. By the end of 2021, RBI found more violations. Lapses in technology, cybersecurity concerns, money laundering accusations, and no separation between the bank and the group's other entities. So the RBI issued a directive. It told Paytm to stop onboarding new customers. It also called for an audit by an external firm. That audit happened. But the RBI was still not happy. They said Paytm was not serious about making amends and they weren't taking corrective measures. So in October 2023, the RBI slapped another fine. This time, the penalty was worth 5.3 crores. So 6 years, multiple warnings and 2 fines. But the company did not fix the problems. By 2024, the RBI had enough. The violations were so serious, they could no longer ignore them. Several accounts lacked KYC, know your customer regulations. It's mandatory for all banks. In some cases, one identity proof was linked to thousands of accounts. There were concerns about fraud, corruption, and money laundering. In some of these accounts, transactions ran up to crores. This was above the regulatory limit. Yet all of it was being allowed. So the RBI issued its latest ultimatum. The deadline is February 29th. After that, Paytm is banned from all banking activities, which leaves the company with 2 big challenges: securing its customers and its lending partners. Paytm users, especially its 40 million merchants, are migrating to other platforms. And the lending partners want nothing to do with Paytm. The RBI ban has made Paytm untouchable. It's a cautionary tale of how giants bite the dust. Paytm grew because it was on top of the curve, easy to use and offered opportunities for everyone. It was, like we said, revolutionary, but it made one big mistake. It took the rule book for granted, and that proved to be its undoing. I guess that's the lesson here. The law catches up, no matter how big you are. Now, here is what the Maldives gets wrong. You cannot grow your economy by betting on a few big players. Growth requires opening up. Case in point, India. It is on the verge of sealing a major trade deal. India could get $100 billion in investment from Europe. And the deal could be signed by April. Discussions are in the final stage, and this proposed agreement with Europe stands out for multiple reasons. Typically, in a classic trade deal, countries remove trade barriers by reducing taxes. This tends to boost import and export. But what India is negotiating with Europe is different. Under this deal, New Delhi is willing to open up its markets, but at a price tag of $100 billion. This money will flow in the form of investments, and this will happen over a period of 15 years. The pact guarantees this investment, and that's a rare feature. Trade deals rarely come with a binding clause on investments. And where is this money coming from? A special bloc of European nations. 4 countries are part of it: Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. Together they're called the EFTA, the European Free Trade Association. Currently, it's this bloc that is negotiating with India, not the entire European Union, just this bloc. But this bloc could set a template for the future, something that the rest of the region could choose to replicate. Next question: what kind of investments are they eyeing? And where will this $100 billion go? For now, one area has been identified: new and existing manufacturing projects. They could be state-run entities or private players. This investment has the potential to generate over 1 million jobs. But for India, the benefits of this deal go beyond the money and the jobs. For instance, more visas are on offer. If the deal goes through, Indian professionals could get easy access to these 4 countries: Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. And what do these countries get in return? What's in it for them? Like I said, they're looking for market access. They want to sell a range of products in India. Look at this list: processed food and beverages, electrical machinery, engineering products, also pharmaceutical and medical devices. With this trade deal, they'll be able to sell all these products and more, most likely at reduced tariffs. Obviously, we'll have to wait for the fine print. But on first impressions, this deal has big benefits for both sides. And the agreement has been in the making for a long time. In fact, the conversation started way back in 2008. So it has taken some 16 years for India and the EFTA, this European bloc, to finalize a deal. And it hasn't been signed yet. The European side wants to sign the pact before the general election in India. But is New Delhi on the same page? Reports say the outline of the deal was locked last month. There is an agreement on pressing and controversial issues like patent protection. They've all been sorted. They just have to tie some loose ends, because New Delhi too would like to lock this up soon. In fact, this is not the only trade pact in the pipeline. Reports say India is holding discussions with as many as 50 countries, 50. These talks are happening both at the bilateral level and the bloc level. It remains to be seen how many of these conversations lead to actual agreements. But one thing is quite clear: India is sending a signal to the world. India is open for business. And speaking of placing bets, would you invest in a Chinese company? If you're a regular in the stock market, chances are you'll steer clear of anything Chinese at the moment. Globally, investors are pulling back from China's market, and these investors are doing so because they're apprehensive. Chinese stocks are rapidly losing their value, and this sentiment applies to Chinese investments in India as well. They're increasingly being viewed with suspicion. The broad sentiment is negative, and it's getting worse by the day. 2 leading names are in trouble: Xiaomi and Paytm. Both are market leaders. Xiaomi is among the leading smartphone sellers in India, while Paytm is synonymous with digital payments. But both companies are under the lens now because of their Chinese connections. We'll start with Xiaomi. This company has raised a concern. Xiaomi officials have written a letter to the government of India. It is about smartphone component suppliers. Xiaomi says these suppliers are wary of setting shop in India. I have a quote from that letter. This is what it says: there are apprehensions among component suppliers regarding establishing operations in India, stemming from the challenges faced by companies in India, particularly from Chinese origin. Xiaomi India's president has signed this letter. And what are the apprehensions? The company did not really spell them out. Reports say Xiaomi is concerned about compliance and visa issues, but towards the end, the statement really gives it away. Here's what it says. Challenges faced by companies in India, particularly from Chinese origin. That's what Xiaomi is worried about. India's scrutiny of Chinese companies. That's what they don't like. Their rise in India was rapid, but in recent years, Xiaomi has had some run-ins with the law. In 2022, Indian officials froze their assets worth over $600 million. They were frozen. Do you know why? Because Xiaomi is said to have violated Indian laws by remitting some money illegally. So company assets were frozen. Last year, Xiaomi moved court against this decision, but a judge rejected their appeal. Then you have Vivo, another Chinese smartphone maker that has faced scrutiny. Just like Xiaomi, Vivo too is accused of remitting money illegally. It was also pulled up for visa violations. Reports say 30 Chinese executives of Vivo came to India. They were given business visas, but when they applied, these executives hid the fact that they worked for Vivo. Plus, some of these employees ended up traveling to Jammu and Kashmir, which was a breach of their business visa provisions. Because Jammu and Kashmir is a sensitive region. Foreigners cannot just travel there. They need permission for it. In addition to a visa, they need a special permit to visit regions like Jammu and Kashmir. Vivo employees violated these rules. So India had valid reasons to investigate. But China does not see it this way. Beijing says Chinese companies are facing discrimination. Listen to this.
China hopes that India can fully understand the mutually beneficial nature of the bilateral economic and trade cooperation and provide a fair, just, transparent business environment for Chinese enterprises there.
If that was indeed the case, India wouldn't have cleared 80 Chinese FDI projects in 2022. 80 projects were cleared, 80. India doesn't have a problem with Chinese investment. It has an issue with shady and murky transactions. And that's the reason why Paytm too is facing scrutiny. The Indian fintech giant, it is facing regulatory trouble. We've been telling you about this. Paytm has been put on notice by India's central bank. It has run afoul of compliances. But for many years, Paytm has ignored warnings from authorities. And now it faces a potential ban from the payment space. Multiple payment services on the app could shut down in March. Paytm is also facing scrutiny for its Chinese links. The company has a Chinese investor. Jack Ma-led Ant Group invested in Paytm, although last year they reduced their stakes. Now they own less than 10% of the shares in Paytm. Now reports say the government of India has set up a panel. It will look into Chinese investments in Paytm, among other things. Moral of the story? Rule of law may be an alien concept for China, but India's message on that front is quite clear. This is non-negotiable. If a Chinese company or investor wants to do business in India, they'll have to follow the rule book. Have you ever looked at an ad of an Indian coaching center? It usually has mugshots of students. Beside their unhappy faces are their ranks, the scores they got in competitive exams. And have you noticed something strange there? Often the first-ranked student is the same in every ad of different institutes claiming credit for the student's score. How is that even possible? Did they attend 3 classes at the same time, or are the ads a lie? In a lot of cases, they are a lie and an exaggeration to show that these institutes are the best and to lure more students and parents. Because this is a big business. Tuitions in India are not just extra classes, they are a way of life. Back in the day, they were optional. Today, you cannot do without them. In 2021, 40% of Indian children opted for tuitions, and the number rises significantly in high school. 83% of high school students in India go to tuition outside school. And there are different kinds. Group tuitions, where one teacher sits with a bunch of students. Private tuitions, where the teacher comes to your house to teach one-on-one. Of course, it's more expensive. And then there are coaching centers like Byju's, Allen, Resonance. Big brands charging big money to teach. And they're quite popular. They've captured India's middle class. But why are we talking about them tonight? Because the government is. The government has come up with new rules for coaching centers. They cannot enroll students below the age of 16, only high school students now. They cannot put out misleading advertisements, so no promising good marks or assured placements. They cannot hold classes for more than 5 hours a day, so students get some time to relax. And if a student leaves midway, they should be refunded. The full fees won't be lost. All of these sound reasonable, well moves. And they bring us to three main questions. One, how big is India's coaching industry? Two, why do Indian children prefer coaching over school? And three, why is the government regulating all of this now? First, let's look at the market size. It's massive and growing. Coaching in India is worth 58,000 crore rupees. By 2028, it will be 1,33,000 crores. The sector grows by almost 50% every year, and much of it is unregulated. Private tuitions and group classes at home cannot be regulated beyond a point, but the big coaching centers can be. The ones training you for competitive exams, IIT, JEE, NEET, UPSC, and the like. They charge an average of 1.5 to 3 lakhs per student per year. The more personalized it gets, the costlier it is. And this is how it goes. You're bundled in a class with a group of people. You have classes from morning to evening. They give you study material. They give you mock tests. Every week you're evaluated. If you do badly, it's a disaster because the scores are sent to your parents, who are most likely paying through their nose. So can you imagine the pressure? Education is a prized commodity in India. It's still aspirational, almost like a currency. It determines your future. Most Indians tend to invest in education over healthcare. So they choose these coaching centers, and a lot of them really cannot afford it. They take loans to pay the fees for coaching, which means the stress on the student only multiplies, and the competition is very, very tough. Most of them don't even make it. You may have heard of Kota, a city in the state of Rajasthan. It's India's coaching capital. Every year, 300,000 students flock to Kota. 3 lakh students, some of them become doctors and engineers. Most of them do not, because millions are competing for a few seats. NEET, for example, it's the entrance exam to medical colleges. In 2023, over 2 million students appeared for it, for NEET. 2 million students. Do you know how many seats were there? Only 140,000, which means only 7% made it. The rest will have to try again or give up. In some cases, they end up giving up on life too. Last year, 27 students died by suicide in Kota. They could not take the pressure. So the government is basically trying to regulate this whole business of coaching. It may be a step in the right direction, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem. Why do students need coaching? Why is school education not enough? The answer lies in our population. India has more than 260 million school-going children, but just 1.4 million schools. Clearly, the resources do not match the demand. There aren't enough teachers or classrooms or funds, and there's rampant corruption. All of it leaves us with an education system that is insufficient. For example, 50% of children in class 5 in rural schools cannot read or write in class 5. They cannot read or write. So clearly, the education system is not good enough. And if you want to make something of yourself, you'll have to look for alternatives, in this case, tuitions. So while regulating the coaching industry is fine, the government needs to look at schools. The national education policy was a starter, but more will have to be done. As the need for education increases, infrastructure and facilities have to keep up, because education may be a ticket to a better life, but it cannot come at the cost of financial ruin and lives. It was August 1950. A very important meeting was taking place in the United States. Two individuals were involved. One was Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. She was India's ambassador to the US, also Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's sister. The second individual was John Foster Dulles, an advisor to President Harry Truman. Later on, he became the US Secretary of State. Now, letters written by Vijay Lakshmi Pandit reveal what happened at that meeting. The American side had a proposal. They said, let's remove China from the United Nations Security Council. Let's put you, India, instead. Basically, a switcheroo. China goes out, India goes in. You don't need a time machine to know what happened next. India doesn't have a permanent UNSC seat, so obviously New Delhi rejected that proposal. Something similar happened again in 1955. This time, the Soviet Union offered India a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, but once again, India declined. Jawaharlal Nehru was Prime Minister both times. He was also his own Foreign Minister, so no one to blame for his decisions. Fast forward to present day, and the issue has become a political lightning rod. Nehru's supporters say it was the right decision. His critics call it a Himalayan blunder. So what really happened in 1950 and 1955? Why?
What secret did the richest man in the world share with Napoleon Hill? 100 years ago, Andrew Carnegie was the richest man in the world, and he mentored Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill researched 500 of the most successful people living in America at that time, and he condensed that particular formula of success in his all-time bestseller, Think and Grow Rich. This formula, which has made more millionaires than any other success formula in the world.
Why did Jawaharlal Nehru reject the offers? And was he right in doing so? Time for a flashback. Let's take the story in 1945. The United Nations was created that year. It had a Security Council with 5 permanent members: the United States, the Soviet Union, China, the United Kingdom, and France. Now, this China was not ruled by the communists. It was ruled by the nationalists. Both sides had been fighting a civil war for 2 decades, but in 1949, that war ended. The communists, led by Mao Zedong, won. The Americans were not happy about this. They did not like the idea of another communist country in Asia. So what did they do? They blocked Mao's regime. They did not allow the communists to occupy China's UNSC seat. Instead, nationalists held on to it. Now, clearly, this was not viable in the long term. You couldn't have a pseudo-China in the Security Council, so Washington came up with a plan. Take China out, put India in. John Foster Dulles pitched this plan to Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. She told the Americans to go slow since India was not keen. Then she wrote to Prime Minister Nehru. We know he rejected the offer. But the reply letter tells us why he did so. It would be a clear affront to China, and it would mean some kind of break between us and China. India, because of many factors, is certainly entitled to a permanent seat in the Security Council, but we are not going in at the cost of China. So Nehru had 2 concerns. First, he thought China would be angry. He thought Mao would turn against him, which he did anyway in 1952, but we'll get to that later. And second, Nehru thought it would undermine the United Nations. So he said, invite China back, then give us a permanent seat. Obviously, that was a non-starter. By 1951, the US and China were at war in Korea. There was no question of inviting China back into the UNSC. So the offer to India disappeared. Was Nehru right in dismissing the Americans? Well, his supporters have 2 things to say. 1, the offer was not genuine. It was more of a feeler from the US. And 2, the US was trying to drive a wedge between India and China to try and recruit India into the Western alliance. Is any of this true? Well, honestly, we don't know. John Dulles seemed very keen on it. He even asked Washington columnists to build public opinion on this issue. But all we can do now is speculate. As for driving a wedge, China did that themselves. 12 years after this offer, they attacked India. Even today, the relationship is frosty. So if Nehru's idea was to keep China happy, it did not work. But pretty soon, he got another shot. In 1955, this time the offer came from the Soviet Union. What's more, there was no China angle to it. The Soviets did not want a replacement or a switcheroo. They said, let's expand the council. Let's add you, India. India as a sixth member. The offer came from this man, Nikolai Bulganin, former premier of the Soviet Union. No messengers this time. The offer went directly to Jawaharlal Nehru, and what was his response? Same as in 1950. We are opposed to pushing ourselves forward to occupy certain positions because that may itself create difficulties. We feel that this should not be done till the question of China's admission and possibly of others is first solved. So back to square one, the same old argument about China. Now there are two things which stand out in Nehru's statement. One, he is clearly hesitant. He says India will not push itself into any position. And two, he talks of others being admitted into the UNSC before India. Who exactly are these others? And why should they have entered before India? Again, we can only speculate. Either way, Nehru rejected this offer as well. Bulganin actually agreed with him, in fact. The Soviet premier said he was just trying to understand India's position and the time was not right. Was this another missed opportunity then? In hindsight, yes. But Nehru did not see it that way. To him, these were not serious offers. In 1955, he was questioned in Parliament about this issue. This. There has been no offer, formal or informal, of this kind. Some vague references have appeared in the press about it, which have no foundation in fact. And the plot thickens. We know that two offers were made. In 1950 and again in 1955. We know that Nehru rejected both these offers. Why then did he say no offers were made? Did he not consider them serious enough? Or did he regret turning down both of them? Again, I'm afraid it's impossible to know. The US offer had very little chance of becoming a reality. They wanted to swap China with India. To do that, you must amend the United Nations Charter. And for that, all permanent members must agree. Would the Soviet Union have agreed to this? China was a fellow communist country, sort of like a junior partner for the Soviets. Would they have agreed to replace that junior partner with India? It seems highly unlikely. But then again, we never tried. The Soviet offer in 1955 seems more plausible. No replacement business there. India would have been added as a sixth member. Who knows? Maybe the US would have agreed to it. But once again, we never tried. Nehru had his own reasons for what he did. He was an idealist. He thought the United Nations Charter was a holy grail. But most importantly, he thought India was not ready. His statement to Bulgaria confirms that. So to notes written by him in 1955. In June that year, the Prime Minister traveled to the Soviet Union. He spent 16 days there. He traveled almost 13,000 kilometers, and during this tour, Nehru wrote something very interesting. We have said that India is not anxious to enter.
I can scale up in 7 days. Right? I can give you thousands of examples. We took it called as no skill agency. How to start an agency without having a skill? Job servicing model simply, right? Me and this guy called Richa, we both started it out, right? We scaled that funnel from 30,000 to 2.5 lakhs per day consistently in 8 days. How?
We have invested 3 hours to plan this funnel and making it live. And that's what I'm going to teach in my workshop on how you can leverage AI and launch a funnel in just 3 hours, which will give you customers 24/7 for your business. That too without paying to any marketing agency or two. Hi, my name is Himanshu Agrawal. I'm the founder of Internet Coaching. After running 100 funnels and generating 23 crores in sales with funnels, I'm able to find a winning funnels which work at 99% time in the market and skyrocket your conversion rate. And when you combine it with AI, you can literally launch funnels in just 3 hours. I'm organizing a workshop for funnels with which I launch a funnel with you live in just 3 hours, making the funnel strategy for complicated ads, creative landing page, and many more things. Click the button below and register for the workshop. If you register right now, you get bonuses for 12,000 for absolutely free. So click the link below and I will see you inside the workshop.
குள்ள 90% ஆஃப் த ஜாப்ஸ் வந்து ஏஐ ரீப்ளேஸ் பண்ணிடும் அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. இது உங்க குழந்தையோட கெரியரை பாதிக்குமா? உங்க குழந்தைங்க மட்டும் ஏஐ மாதிரியான ஃபியூச்சர் ஸ்கில்ஸுக்கு இப்போ இருந்தே தயாரா இருந்தாங்க அப்படின்னா அவங்களை கண்டிப்பா பாதிக்காது. அது எப்படி சார் என் குழந்தைகள் இந்த மாதிரி ஃபியூச்சர் ஸ்கில்ஸ்க்கு தயார்படுத்துறதுன்னு கேக்குறீங்க. ஹாய், என் பேரு பிரேம். ஏர்பஸ், போயிங், கிரேன் ஏரோஸ்பேஸ் அண்ட் சிஸ்டம்ஸ், ஏவியேஷன் இந்த மாதிரி டாப் ஏவியேஷன் கம்பெனிஸ்க்கு நான் ஒர்க் பண்ணியிருக்கேன். அது மட்டும் இல்லாம எங்களுடைய சிட்டி அப்படிங்கிற பிளாட்ஃபார்ம் வழியா கடந்த 10 வருஷமா 5 லட்சத்துக்கும் மேற்பட்ட குழந்தைங்களுக்கு ஃபியூச்சர் ஸ்கில்ஸ்ல ட்ரைனிங் கொடுத்துட்டு இருக்கோம். வரப்போற சண்டே நான் உங்களுக்காக சயின்டிஃபிக் பேரண்டிங் அப்படிங்கிற ஒர்க் ஷாப் ஒன்று கண்டக்ட் பண்றேன். இந்த ஒர்க் ஷாப்ல உங்க குழந்தைங்களை எப்படி ஏஐ மாதிரியான ஃபியூச்சர் ஸ்கில்ஸ்க்கு ஸ்டெப் பை ஸ்டெப்பா ட்ரெயின் பண்ணணும் அப்படிங்கிற டீடைல்ல நான் உங்களோட ஷேர் பண்ண போறேன். இந்த ஒர்க் ஷாப்போட பிரைஸ் வெறும் 99 rupees தான். அண்ட் இந்த ஒர்க் ஷாப்ல என்ரோல் பண்ண போற எல்லாருக்குமே 2000 rupees worth ஆஃப் சயின்டிஃபிக் பேரண்டிங் அப்படிங்கிற புக்லெட் ஃப்ரீயா கொடுக்க போறேன். பின் எதுக்காக வெயிட் பண்றீங்க? இப்பவே கீழே இருக்க பட்டனை கிளிக் பண்ணி ஒர்க் ஷாப்ல ரெஜிஸ்டர் பண்ணிக்கோங்க. ஒர்க் ஷாப்ல சந்திக்கலாம்.
The Security Council at this stage, even though as a great country she ought to be there. So Nehru was in no hurry. He thought India had more boxes to tick. In hindsight, we can say it was a missed opportunity. A permanent seat would have helped India on multiple occasions. you.